Welcome to the Representation Agreement series of Brick by Brick, Building Wealth Through Real Estate. In this episode, I am talking about the Landlord Representation Agreement. So this agreement is to be used when there is a landlord who wants to offer a real property, a unit or a freehold property for lease on the open market. This agreement is to be entered into after the landlord is made aware of the RECO Information Guide and the new legislation entitled TRESA. My name is Nico James Bach. I am the condo whiz and broker at Royal LePage Signature Realty in downtown Toronto. The RECO Information Guide is a mandatory piece, a document that has to be presented to clients and consumers prior to the signing of any representation agreements. The TRESA, which stands for Trust in Real Estate Services Act, kicked in phase 2 on December 1st, 2023, and it's made wide-reaching changes to the former Real Estate and Business Brokers Act. One of those changes is the introduction of the RECO Information Guide. The RECO Information Guide replaces the 1 or 2 page working with a realtor pamphlet that was available under the previous legislation. The RECO Information Guide is 11 pages long, and it goes into great detail about the relationship between a registrant, a real estate agent, and a consumer. The consumer is either a client of the brokerage or a non-represented individual. Under the previous legislation, there was another category called customer. So the customer was neither a client nor a non-represented individual. It was an individual that received services and advice from the real estate professional. That category no longer exists. So the only individual that can receive fiduciary duties as well as advice and full representation is a client that has signed a representation agreement with the brokerage. All others are considered unrepresented and have to have their own representative, either a lawyer or some legal professional, handle the transaction on their behalf, provide the paperwork. The real estate agent would simply present that paperwork, vet it, and present that paperwork to their client. So the different sections of the RECO guide, I'm only going to highlight the individual sections. There will be another episode that goes into greater detail about the actual guide itself. The first part of the guide deals with working with a real estate agent, what that entails, the responsibilities of both the real estate agent and the individual receiving the guide, because there are responsibilities. The purpose of TRESA is to provide more transparency and to really flesh out those rights and responsibilities. The next part of the guide talks about the risks of representing yourself. So if you decide not to enter into a representation agreement with a brokerage, there are inherent risks involved with that. And the guide goes on to explain what those risks are. After that, there is assigning a contract. So the contract is the representation agreement that establishes agency. So this episode talks about the landlord representation. So an individual or a company that wants to lease out a space. The other contracts, major contracts, are buyer representation as well as seller representation. There is also tenant representation, and there is multiple representation. Multiple representation is consent and not a separate representation agreement, but it is an important component and one that has to be fully understood by all parties involved. After that, there is understanding, in fact, multiple representation, and then how to make a complaint if there is an issue that arises and a complaint needs to be lodged against the real estate professional. The guide provides the steps to be taken and the information that the consumer would need in order to start that complaint process. Getting into the landlord representation agreement, it, like all contracts, have to be in writing. That is a major consideration, that these representation agreements have to be reduced to writing, and they have to be reduced to writing before an agreement of purchase and sale or an agreement to lease is entered into. So the different sections of this agreement will be explained during this episode. There are two ways of offering a property for lease. One is through the MLS system, so that provides the information to a greater audience, like a larger audience. And one other way is through an exclusive representation agreement. So with the exclusive agreement, the representative has the responsibility of promoting the property that is going to be for lease to their network. So the first part of the listing agreement provides for the option to select either MLS or exclusive. If the listing agreement is going to be on the MLS system, the minimum amount of time is 60 days. So the duration of the listing agreement, the minimum duration is 60 days. An exclusive listing can have any duration. There's no minimum or maximum. All contracts also have to have an expiry date and a commencement date. So after selecting whether to go on MLS or exclusive, the name of the brokerage is identified, the name of the landlord, as well as the designated representative for the brokerage, which is the real estate agent. Then there are the dates, so the commencement date and the expiry date. After that, the price. So the offer price, offer to lease on the MLS or exclusive system, that has to be clearly indicated in numbers and in letters. As well, after that section, the landlord, in this case, has to acknowledge that they are not part of another landlord representation agreement for the same real estate, for the same address that's being offered for lease. So their initials go in that section. After that, the third clause in the listing agreement deals with commission. So it's an important section of the agreement that sets out the fee that is to be paid to the brokerage. The fee that is to be paid to the brokerage is either expressed in numbers, a number like an amount, or a percentage, or a term. So 1 month's lease would be an example of what can be expressed, or a dollar amount. And the amount that is to be provided for any cooperating brokerage. So the listing brokerage is responsible for receiving the total fee, and then it's the listing brokerage's responsibility to divide that commission if there is a cooperating brokerage involved. Representation is the next section, and that is the section that describes the agency relationship between the landlord and the brokerage. It also introduces the concept of multiple representation. Multiple representation is an important consideration where there are two clients represented by the same real estate agent for the same property. So if there is, in this case, the listing agreement between the landlord as the landlord client, and there is a tenant that is interested in this property, and the real estate agent enters into a tenant representation agreement with that tenant, that will form multiple representation, and it has to be agreed to by all parties. And the parties do not have to agree to multiple representation. If they do not agree to multiple representation, another designated representative will have to be selected to represent the tenant. The final part of the landlord representation agreement, the listing agreement, deals with electronic communication. So this outlines that the communication can be done electronically, as well as the electronic signatures. The agreement is dated and signed by all parties. Towards the end is a declaration of insurance. All real estate registrants have to have insurance, errors of omission insurance, and that declaration is evident in the representation agreements, all representation agreements. If you are not if you're just listening to this on a podcast, then you don't have the benefit of going through the different sections with me. I left a link at the end of the show notes, so you can watch the YouTube video, which shows you the different sections of the representation agreements, and the first 2 pages describing the RECO Information Guide. That concludes this episode in this series. My contact information is also in the show notes, and you can reach out to me through my various social channels. My question to you is, if you are a landlord or contemplating being a landlord, were you aware of the different agreements that are available? And if you have been a landlord in the past and used the services of a real estate agent, what was your experience like? I'm interested in knowing what that was like. If you didn't use a real estate agent to handle that, would you consider using one now? That's it for this episode. We will be back with another representation agreement, so look out for that. For now, I say ciao, ciao.